Hello and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you some strong openers for patch 12.18. This video was requested by a couple of people in the previous video, so let's get into it. Okay, so starting out with probably one of my favorite openers is Astrals. This is because you're guaranteed 1.1 gold on average, and you only get more every time you upgrade one of the Astral units and increase the star level. Usually just playing around 3 Astrals and then you can throw in any bruises. Remember that by playing additional Astral units you actually get more gold. So when you find a Lux, if you don't have any better units to play, usually you just play Lux. If you have AD items you can play around a Nidalee carry and then eventually pivot into Varus and then finally into your endgame AD board. Or if you have AP items you can play around a Lux carry as she can hold on to all AP items as well as either blue buff or Shojin if you think that you need mana later on. Usually just playing around Astrals plus Bruiser and then eventually you can pivot into whatever. The next opener is Lagoon. If you're playing around a Lagoon opener, you usually want to stick with it for a while as the rewards just keep getting better and better. Usually you're playing around a Zac Malphite plus 1 backline unit. This is either going to be Talia or Kai'Sa. The best items for Talia is usually blue buff plus Morello, so then you can pivot into Storm quite easily, as well as the fact that you'll get a lot more stacks if you have a blue buff or a Shojin. Of course, you want to prioritize frontline units such as Zac and Malphite, as you want to make sure that the fights are going on for a longer period of time, so that you're stacking more. Playing mages is nice if you're playing around Malphite, as you can play Silas, as this gives you Bruiser anyway, and then you can just play another mage. Usually it's just going to be Vlad, as this gives you more frontline. However, if you do hit a Kai'Sa instead, same items go onto your Kai'Sa, and instead of playing around mages, you're obviously going to be playing around Demancer, plus you can play Guardian or Bruisers for any more frontline. Sometimes you will eventually play Seraphine, but most of the time you want to avoid units like Seraphine and Zeri, as they don't stack very quickly, and they are good units later, but they're not very strong in the opener. A really strong tempo opener is if you hit a Sejuani 2, you can play around the guild opener and then of course a swift shot to hold on to your AD items. Though technically Ezreal can hold on to AP or AD, normally you're going to be playing around AD items so you can pivot quite easily into Xayah. Now, the trade-off of whether or not you itemize Twitch or Ezreal is based on whether or not you hit Ezreal 2-star, as if you can itemize Ezreal, it's a lot easier to pivot into the Xayah board as you don't have to remake Twitch. Although that being said, if you do play around Vertical Guild, having Twitch as your item holder is actually really strong and he can hold on to all of Xayah's items, then you just have to remake him. And having to remake him and losing Twitch 2-star to a Twitch 1-star later into the game isn't that much of a big deal. Usually you're just playing around a Cavalier frontline, as Sedge is going to be your main tank for the very early game. Then if you get yourself a Zippy and you're carrying Twitch as an item holder, that can be quite strong, as he gets a lot more attack speed when you run Vertical Guild. Varus is also a really good item holder, and until you hit Xayah 2, you usually want to play around Varus 2 instead. A good AP opener is playing around Jade with Karma holding onto your AP items. Now, the main disadvantage to this board is you're not playing around Lagoon, so you don't really want to be pivoting into Seraphine or Som, which are the most meta comps right now. So if you are playing this line, you're usually looking towards pivoting into Deja. Usually you just play around 3 Jade with Karma as the main item holder, then some of the other units that you can play. If you get lucky and the Shimmer scale item is good, you can play around Volibear with Dragonmancer, and then you just play around Nasus to get that 3 Shimmer. However, if the Shimmer scale item isn't very good, I wouldn't recommend playing around this. Another good unit to fit in here is Olaf, as he gives you Warrior for your Wukong and Bruiser for your Jax, and Olaf's a pretty good unit at just softening up the front line so that Karma can finish off kills. Of course, if you don't have AP items, you can play around AD items and just put them on your Olaf. An early game, you might be playing around an early Nidalee 2-star, and then you can swap out the Karma for Gnar, as this gives you Shapeshifter, and Nidalee with 3 Jade plus Shapeshifter is usually a pretty good item holder, and then around level 7 you can pivot her into something else, and finally on 8, of course, you're going to be pivoting out of Olaf into any other AD comps. Another decent opener is if you have a Zeke's, you can play around Vertical Darkflight. Basically with this comp, you're just looking to kill as many units as possible to make it to 6 so that you can roll down for your upgrades. Instead of playing other synergies, you'd rather just play multiple Aphelios and Rel so you can get as many Zeke's. Otherwise, other units you can play is of course Cavalier. You don't really want to play anything more than 2 Cannoneer, so most of the time it's just going to be Vertical Darkflight units. If the Mirage is good and you have decent Yone items, you can play around a Yone opener. The only downside to this opener is you usually need to make sure that you have healing on your Yone. Most of the time you're just going to be playing around an early Leona 2 if you can, and then any other Guardian upgrades of course. You can of course pivot this board to have Nunu instead if you don't end up hitting that Leona 2. Then quite easily you can tech in some more Cavaliers, and usually you're playing around Olaf, which means you can tech in Scale Storm quite easily with Lilia. But if you don't really care about the scale score and bonus damage, then usually Sejuani is going to be better. And of course, if you do have an augment for Mirage, then you can play the 4 Mirage quite easily, as this fits really nicely with Nunu, Yone, and Leona. Then of course you can play Guardian, and if you play Braum and Lilia, you get free Scale Scorn. It doesn't mean too much, as they're not going to be doing too much damage. However, if you do have a spat on Lilia with Mirage Spat, sometimes she can do a bit. And that is the end of the video. I hope you guys did enjoy learning about some of the meta openers in patch 12.18. Now remember that if I didn't mention a specific opener, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad, it's just not one that I would default towards. Usually I like to go towards the econ openers, as this is quite flexible and you can pivot out of them at any point, whereas if you start off without an econ opener and then you don't streak, then you're in a pretty bad spot. So that's it for this video. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.